So let's get started with today's lesson. This is our final genre, the argue genre. Tell me, what are the other genres we've learned so far? Call one out. Procedure. Information. That looks like it was really scripted because you all said this in the same order, but that's okay. So yeah, you just talked about that before the break. You just talked about those three, and hopefully it got your memory about those three genres: the procedure, the information, and the explanation. We're going into our final genre for the semester, argue. And just like with the other genres, there are different text types, okay? Hopefully before the break, you talked about the different text types when you were talking to your partner about those different genres. Today we're going to talk about three text types with the argue genre. The first one is exposition, the second one is discussion, and the third is review. And my hope is that you'll be able to use, analyze, and teach language in your subject area related to these text types. Now, as just a quick preview, these two are going to be very closely related, as you will see. This one is going to be kind of separate. I think in some subjects, these two will work nicely, and in other subjects, this one will work nicely. And just as a reminder, because this class has all different subjects, not all text types will be compatible with every subject. But hopefully, between at least those two groups, you'll find something that works in your subject. Okay? So as we talked about in the break, and as you just said, we've talked about procedure genre, we've talked about information, explanation, and now here we are in argument. So what is argument? Argument is about telling your point of view on something. I want you to think about your subject for a second. When would students tell their point of view? Now I want to contrast this before I let you discuss. Information is very objective. The information genre is very objective. It says what something is. We don't include opinions in that. It is what it is. Same with explanation. We tell why something happens or how a phenomenon happens. It's very objective. This is how it happens. But with argument, we get into the more subjective, the opinion. Okay? So for example, is Dr. Graham your favorite professor? Oh, I guess that's pretty objective, isn't it? The answer is just yes. Yeah, okay. Sorry, bad example. It's about your opinion. It's about things where people can have different answers, okay? So I want you to, very briefly, turn to the person next to you. I want you to take 30 seconds. Tell them something in your subject where students can have an opinion on something, where they can say their view. Go, tell the person next to you. Okay. Winston, you're the winner. So tell me, in your subject, PE, is there room for the argue genre, having an opinion on something?
We talk about what's your opinion about transgender athletes?
Oh, yeah. So you said your opinion on transgender athletes. That's a hot topic right now and is certainly something that could happen in their subject. Yeah, so I think that's a great example. Thank you, Winston. Let's see if we can get another subject. Evelyn. I'm sorry, abortion? Yeah, so her subject is health, for those of the guests that don't know. Her subject is health. Abortion might be something where students can present their view. Good. But let's talk about the text types. So as a reminder, your context is we're trying to argue. Three different text levels. First one is exposition. And that's where you're going to argue one position, okay? So in an exposition text type, you're only presenting one side of the issue, all right? We'll go back to our example. Dr. Graham is a great professor. You would only present the positive side, everything he does well. His accent is just so beautiful and nice to listen to. His choice of colors of shirt are just provide this calmness in the room, and most importantly, his jokes are hilarious. That's the exposition, where you only present one side. The discussion, like I said, these two are kind of related. The discussion is where you present both sides, okay? So all of those great things about me, but maybe you would say some not so great things about me. He always looks so tired because his child never sleeps, okay? Or, I don't know, he drinks too much coffee, okay? Presenting both sides. And you can think about the two topics that we just discussed, transgender athletes, abortion. You could think about how two sides could be presented there, or how someone could present one side. As I said, these two are together, and we're going to discuss more details in a moment about these two. Review is kind of separate. Review is not necessarily giving an opinion on an issue. It's more about giving your evaluation about something. Okay, so for example, right now, they're making a video of me. We've got 4 different people watching me and taking notes. They may be engaging in some type of evaluation of my teaching. This is what we would call the review text type. And you can think probably in your subjects, particularly the performance-based subjects, music, art, and even PE, how we would evaluate whether someone did the skill or did whatever activity, how well they did it, or what areas they could improve. So we're giving an opinion here about their performance. I want you to take a moment. I just introduced 3 text types for the argue genre: exposition, discussion, and review. Turn to the person next to you. Tell them your understanding so far about those 3 text types. Go. Any questions about that? I did see some confused faces. Any questions so far? Yes, Teresa.
What's the difference between the 2 verbs in exposition, argue, and discussion?
It's arbitrary. Well, because I guess I chose that, argue, because you are really going heavy on one position. And as we talk about it, as we talk about the details of the stages, you're going to see that when you're doing the exposition, you're really trying to convince someone of something, okay? But with the discussion, you are presenting both sides. So you're not really, I guess I chose argue and present here, the 2 different verbs, because I was trying to emphasize, one is about pushing a position, one is about giving both sides, and not necessarily letting the reader decide, because you'll see that you will present something at the end. We'll talk about that when we get to stages, but I think that's the reason. Thank you. Other questions? Yes?
We have an exposition and discussion. Why do we need to review?
This is a different text type. So think about before, when we did explain. What were some of the text types for our last genre, explain?
Cycling.
Okay, cyclical. What else? Factorial, system, those types of things. Same thing here. These are different text types. So would you say that cyclical and system were the same? No. So same thing. Review and discussion are the same. Exposition and discussion are similar. Just kind of like how you said sequential and cyclical was kind of the same. I think, when we talked about that, we said those 2 text types shared some similarities. Exposition and discussion share similarities as a text type, but there are some differences. Review is kind of much more separate. The difference between, say, like a factorial and a cyclical. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah.
Discussion is for informing reader about human centered.
I think that's a fair way to put it. But the only thing that I want to clarify, because you said writer. Remember in this course, I'm teaching you these different types of genres because they aren't necessarily things that you're going to do in writing. They're also the way that you organize information for your students when you are presenting orally. So when we talk about how do you present some of the other genres like procedure, the stages, okay? When we talked about inform and those different stages and explain. Same thing here. You're not necessarily, as bilingual teachers, going to write an exposition unless you're going to write something to the Taipei Times saying, this is how I feel about bilingual education. They'll probably publish it because they've published quite a few already. And you're going to read some of them today. It isn't necessarily about writing, okay? So I just want to clarify, you said writer. It's about the way we organize knowledge and the way we organize information for students, okay? So I want you to think about it from that perspective. Now, I think I told you this in a previous class when I told you, okay, next week we're going to do argue. And I told you that this could be one of the most difficult genres for you as a bilingual teacher. And there's going to be two reasons why I think it's difficult. One is going to be from a cognitive perspective, and one is going to be from a language perspective. Let's talk about the cognitive perspective first. So here is our good friend Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy. You should be very familiar with him at this point and his work. Based on this, and based on what you know about argue right now, why do you think I would say argue might be the most difficult of the genres we've talked about? Think about where procedure is, think about where inform is, think about where explain is. Why might I say argue is the most difficult cognitively? Take a minute, talk to the person next to you. Using this as your guide, why might I say that? Go. Minnie, why might I say that argue may be the most difficult?
Because we think that students need to talk their opinion, so they need to create something out.
Okay.
And so for create is like talk.
Okay. How many of you said that? Okay, a few of you. Okay. Let me hear, since I didn't get all hands, I'll call on one other person, see if we can get another view, and then I'll share my thoughts on it. Penny.
I think after you remember it and understand, apply, analyze it, then you can review, and the student can do an evaluation.
Okay, so you went sort of to the evaluate part. So Minnie said create, Penny said evaluate. Okay. When we talk about these different genres, let's do inform for a second. So remember, inform answers the question, what something is. You very much can do the what something is at the remember and understand level. Does that mean inform does not use these other levels as well? No, it doesn't mean that. But you can express the inform at these levels where you describe something or you define something. Same with the explain genre. The explain genre can, at those levels, be expressed. It doesn't mean that when you're doing explanations, you don't go to these other levels. It simply means that these levels are compatible with those genres. But I don't think argue is. Because to be able to argue one side or to be able to argue two sides, you're going to have to analyze some information. You've got to analyze different sides, and then you've got to evaluate those different sides. And the same thing when we talk about review, when you are reviewing a performance. Of course you have to know what makes a good piece of art, what makes good music, what makes a good defensive strategy, or what makes good teaching. You have to know those things, but you also have to evaluate to actually do the genre. And so cognitively, to be able to do this genre, you have to be at those other levels, whereas the explain and the inform, they can be done at these lower cognitive levels. Now, I do want to clarify one thing. I think Penny said that you have to build. Bloom's taxonomy does not necessarily work like that. And I don't think he intended it to be sort of a building block. He was essentially just talking about different ways to understand knowledge construction. Okay, I won't go that's not really the point of today's class. If you're really interested in the history of Bloom's, you can come to my office. I'm happy to talk to you about it over lunch. But I want to just clarify that misunderstanding. He never intended for you to do remember first and then understand and then apply and then analyze. That was not his intention. Okay, and I think it's often been misinterpreted like that, but that was not his intention with this. Okay, so questions on cognitive part. Why this might be the more difficult. Okay, let's talk about the language part. I know the text is small here, but I think you've already downloaded the slides. I see some of your eyes drooping on this Monday morning. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to stand up. I'd like you to do the same thing. Okay, so here we have the CEFR. Descriptors for spoken production. I want you to read through those with a partner. Go find someone new, someone you have not talked to today. Someone you have not talked to today. They always talk to each other no matter what. Don't do that we have video evidence if you don't follow the instructions. All right. What I'd like you to do, go find someone you haven't talked to today. Look at these descriptors, and why might I feel that linguistically argue may be the most difficult? Go. Rennie, what was your discussion about?
Student and everyone, they just can use simple phrases. So that is difficult to explain or to describe their opinions.
Okay. All right. I think that's a pretty good answer. Let me call on one other person, see if they have a different perspective. Kevin.
I think that maybe the high school because the argument maybe they need to the B1, the proficiency of the B1, because for the high school students doesn't have the B1.
Why did you say B1?
B1 because in the B1 they say they can briefly give reasons and explanation for their opinions and plans. So I think it is a little hard for the students maybe, and in the A2. Maybe they can just use the simple sentence to speak their opinion, but I think it won't have the strong for the students to speak their opinion.
Fair. Yeah. Okay. So similar answers here, but Kevin, I think, latched on to this. I can briefly give reasons and explanations for opinions and plans. This is the first time in this sequence that we start to see the words opinions, okay, and explanations and reasons. And of course, that is part of the argue genre. So if we take this for what it is, now it's just a reference. It doesn't have to be this way. But according to this reference, it is at the B1 level that students can independently, let me emphasize that word again, independently, without support, start to give reasons and explanations for their opinion. Now, why do I emphasize that word independently? Because I want to make sure that you understand that they might be able to do this with some support at these levels. And we've talked about many different ways that you can support your students. Substitution tables, sentence stems, graphic organizers. There are ways that I think you can support students. But it is at the independent level at B1 that they can be able to do these, according to this reference. So keep in mind that it may be linguistically more difficult than some of the other genres and text types we've done as well. So what does all of this mean for you as bilingual teachers? Well, it could mean several things. But I think the first thing is that you have to have reasonable expectations about what your students can do linguistically in these different text types. And you've got to provide support for them if you want them to be able to do the argue genre. Because I think some bilingual teachers will get frustrated. They'll think, oh, I want my students to express their opinions. I really want this, but oh, they just can't do it. What I want you to understand is kind of how this falls in the sequence of their development. That it is at the B1 level that it's independent. And that it does require a lot of cognition to be able to do this type. Now, does that mean you cannot do it? No. Especially because you are a bilingual teacher. You're not an EMI teacher. The policy allows you flexibility at the secondary level to teach bilingually. So, you must create opportunities for cognitively challenging learning experiences. Argue being one type of cognitively challenging learning experience. And you're going to have to decide how much of that is done in English, and maybe how much of it is done in Mandarin. Maybe you do part of it in English at the linguistic level where they are with the support, but then you give other things. You do other things in Mandarin. Okay? Questions on that? Okay, so let's dig deeper. Let's dig deeper into the exposition and discussion. We'll start talking about some stages. Like I said, these two are similar. These two are similar. Both are going to express positions of an argument. But as we've discussed, discussion involves presenting both sides, where one side is just exposition. I'd like you to get into groups by subject. So music people get with music people, art people get with art people, PE. I want you to stand up. If you're an English teacher, find a group of friendly people. See who's smiling the most on this Monday morning, who looks the least bored. Go with that group, because they'll be the most fun. I want you to stand up, and I want you to make a list, not just of subjects where you would give an opinion, because we already did that. But I actually want you to think more about this dichotomy of exposition and discussion. Are there any subjects are there any topics in your subject where you might just present one side? And are there topics where you'd present both sides? Stand up. Go find someone. Go find your group. Go find your subject group. All right, Kira. Home economics. Can you tell me one of each? One where you might do an exposition, which is one side, and one discussion where both sides for home economics. Of a balanced diet. Advantages of a balanced diet. Okay.
For discussion, we can talk about the good side and the bad side of the fast fashion.
Of the
Fast fashion.
Oh, of the fast fashion. Okay. So remember, I think you guys did the presentation on fast fashion, right? Or you did You did fast fashion. So, one-sided, arguing why students should have a healthy diet. I think that is where you'd want to just argue the positives, okay? Whereas advantages and disadvantages of fast fashion, okay? Arguing both sides, okay? How should we organize this as a teacher? So now we're going to go into the stages. Because obviously, the exposition and discussion are similar in that it's both about presenting sides. But they are slightly different in terms of the stages. So I want you to look at the table on this slide, at the paragraph level, at the stage level. I've listed the stages here for exposition and for discussion. Turn to the person next to you. Which stages are similar? Which stages are different? Tell the person next to you. Go. I just had a question from a group, and as soon as I answered it and walked away, I just heard another person ask the same question to their group members. So I probably should discuss this question. All right. Sorry. I'm getting a lot of questions about what does appeal mean. The laughs tell me that that's a common question. If somebody asked you what appeal means, could any of you tell me? Yeah, I just answered the question for you, so tell me what it is.
Is to tell the people what you want them
To do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically appealing to them to tell them what you want them to do. Because remember, in the exposition, are we presenting one side or two sides? One side. And we're presenting one side because, well, we believe in that. That's what we want them to do. Okay? We want the students to eat healthy. So the appeal is, you should eat healthy foods. Okay? Now, with that explanation, you might be asking, well, what is issue presentation here? Issue presentation is telling what exactly we're talking about. Think about the explain genre. When we introduce the phenomenon, right? We say, for example, the water cycle is the process of water going from sky to ground, for example. Remember that you started almost all inform and explain by defining or stating what something is. In the argue genre, we're essentially doing that with issue presentation. Let's go with the healthy food example. You have a lot of choices when you choose your meals. Some foods are healthy, some foods are unhealthy. We're presenting the issue, right? Okay. If we go with the smoking issue, okay? Nowadays, many people smoke cigarettes. We're presenting the issue, okay? So the first part of the stage, and you'll notice that it's both in the exposition and the discussion, you state what it is. And that is going to be similar whether you are presenting exposition or discussion. But you'll notice, as hopefully you discussed, exposition has the appeal, but discussion doesn't. So we would follow that up by saying, you should eat healthy food. You should not smoke. Would we say that in the discussion if we're presenting both sides? Yes or no? No. Why? Because we're not taking a position on it. Because we intend to say things that are for that and say things that are against that. Okay? So we'll talk details after the break and how you can use this in your bilingual classroom. Enjoy your break. Thank you.